You're listening to the StudioPTBO podcast, where we talk all things marketing to help you build and grow your business online. Welcome to the latest episode. Welcome to the StudioPTBO podcast. We are back, and we're back at it again with another guest. The second podcast we recorded today, and it's a rainy day, so it's a good day for a podcast. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope you're keeping well. If it's your first time tuning into the StudioPTBO podcast, we talk all things marketing, branding, all the good stuff around entrepreneurship, mindset, and we have some great guests. Neil Morden, how are you doing over there? Are you enjoying the weather?
Yes, I'm excellent. I can deal with the weather because my gardens need this, because we've had a major dry spell here in Peterborough, Canada. So I will take the pouring rain. And yes, this is the first time we've had multiple guests on at once. And we're really delighted to have co-authors Karen Holst and Douglas Ferguson on the show today. And they are co-authors of a new book called Start Within. And really the tagline of the book is how to sell your idea, overcome roadblocks, and love your job. And that's not easy to do, but it will be after you read this book, right, guys? Welcome to the show. I guess as context, before we sort of dive deeper into the framework of the book and what you cover, maybe Karen, if you could give us a little background on your background and in terms of being an entrepreneur and now intrapreneur. And then we'll hop over to Douglas as well to give his sort of backstory and how it led to you guys doing this book.
Sure. So I co-founded an ed tech startup in Austin, Texas that took me to California in the work that we were doing. And when we got acquired, had a moment of reflection. We'd been doing that for 13 years. Wasn't quite ready to do my next startup, but definitely rearing to go and solving problems. So there was a great opportunity with the California Department of Education where they were taking private sector people and putting them in public sector problems. And I had a year-long fellowship where I headed up ed tech there and had this moment of realization that solving problems within larger organizations is so much different than having a startup, obviously, and then very similar. And the conversations around innovating and starting new ideas within larger organizations was still focusing around the culture and not the doers. And that's who I think I am, right? And so from there, I went to IDEO and helped them launch products and services. And again, had this moment of like, this feels similar to being an entrepreneur, but different, and how, and started collecting stories and doing research. And that was really the creation of Start Within and trying to create the playbook to do this work. And then that's when I met Douglas and we did this together. And I continue to do work with big companies and also am an advisor to startups.
And you have a LinkedIn learning course as well that you created?
Yes. There's two out right now, one on launching product and another on product innovation. So it's focus on product managers that are, you have a great idea and you're often told you're the CEO of the product when you're a product manager, but you don't quite have the authority to be the CEO. So how do you get that buy-in and make things happen? That's what the courses are about in our book.
Cool. Douglas, a little backstory on you. I guess you're a design sprint facilitator. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but you can give our listeners and viewers a framework of that.
Yeah, started off my career writing software. So like Karen was in startup land, participating, founding, and running startups for many years, and stumbled into this interesting process called the design sprint, which led me into this realm of kind of facilitation and helping teams solve really tough problems. And as I reflected on my career, I realized that there was kind of a consistent thread throughout the entire process of kind of connecting teams together, helping them work better together. And whether it was starting off with agile and then lean and all these different techniques of how we can work better together. And the design sprint's just another example of that. And so a lot of these like I would say hard wrought lessons, scar tissue, I was able to bake into the book and share some of these insights so that other people that come behind me might more nimbly avoid the pitfalls.
It's so interesting. Like I was going through the book, and like I found that there was definitely a lot of reflection, and it was really interesting because, like you mentioned, like with the entrepreneurial background, but also the corporate. I spent 10 years in the corporate, corporate working for Best Buy, and a lot of the, it was hard to kind of implement change. So I'm really curious to know, like, what advice do you have for those product managers, those marketing reps that are trying to, like, push the organization through? Like, there's a lot of advice you have inside the book, but I'm really curious, like, what are 3 tactics you found that are really needle moving activities for a marketing rep, a product manager, somebody within an organization that is essentially a captain for change, I guess you could say, when I was in corporate? What are 3 tactics that they can essentially implement now in order to get to where they want to go, or their North Star, in order to get the end result that they're looking for within the organization?
So there's 2 places that I would lead someone to think about this work. One is busting assumptions and what is getting in the way of your idea and how to make it happen. And I want to pause on that, and maybe I'll let Douglas dive in deeper on that one. But even before that, when you're at the inception point of your idea, it's early phases, and there's something that's held you back from just going out and doing it, right? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes you're waiting for permission, you're waiting for the environment to be perfect. Oh, not right now when I'm working from home, but when I get back into the office, this will be something. There will always be something to hold you back. And there's an exercise that we have in the book that you really lean into that. What is the negative thinking, the things that you believe are holding you back? Write them down, lean in on that moment. It might be, I don't know how to do it. I don't have everything I need in place. Or what if my company pivots and goes a whole other direction? After you put those ideas down, you can then bucket them into different opportunities to counterattack them. So in the book, we talk about, some of these things that you think are holding you back are actually what we call, I can handle this. So I like to compare it to working out. When you start a new workout program, you often say, oh, I need new shoes, or I don't know where to go to do that exercise program. You have all these excuses building up that keep you from getting started. But when you say it and you write it down and you name it, you could actually create a counterattack. Just buy some new shoes. Just find the videos online. Start somewhere. It's just about voicing those little things that feel like they're barriers when they aren't really. The second bucket we call the what ifs. And those are typically constraints around the future being unknown. So what if my company pivots? What if my division downsizes? Those could happen. And you need to pay attention and build your idea around those moments, but you also have to let it go. You build with purpose, knowing that it could happen, and you just hope that the future builds, in the right direction. And then the third we call the showstopper. So these are the things that are truly reasons to pause. And the reason they're called showstoppers is it's a pause. It's not a full stop forever. The show must go on eventually. It's really reflecting on what needs to be in place for my idea to thrive. Who do I need to get to know? What skills do I need to, build up to be able to go do this work? And I think that, or those early phases of creating, the optimism and the confidence in your idea are key. And then you can go out and start doing the actual work. So there's a reason you haven't done the idea. What are those reasons? Write them down, bucket them, counterattack them, and move on.
I love that, because it's so funny. Like, we just got off a podcast with Bradley from Lightspeed VT, and he was talking about mindset. And it's like, right now, like, everything starts with mindset. And like, the more and more that I realize this, and the more that the entrepreneurs or the business owners or the people that are marketing reps in the organization understand that, so much starts with mindset. Super, super interesting. I'm curious, Douglas, like, over the last little while, like, would you echo that same sentiment, or do you have the 3 key tactics that you found are needle moving activities?
I completely concur with Karen, and like, as she mentioned, assumptions are woven in that entire process, and so we have to account for those. And I think the apart from these kind of things we tell ourselves that shut ourselves down, the other thing that will prevent us from being successful are the things we tell ourselves that are not truthful. Or that we believe that don't bear fruit. And so a lot of times I call that ego-driven product development, where it's like, oh, I know this is how things are, and I'm just going to go do this, or build something based on, to use the word, assumption. Yeah. And in the book we have a few methods to attack the assumptions. And The one thing I'll caution the reader on is that assumptions are ever present. They are ever evolving. And so you can't, you want to be proud of the fact that you maybe uncovered some assumptions, but you can't be too proud, and you can't sit back and be too happy about that, because next thing you know, another one's going to sneak in. And so always be vigilant and making sure that you're double checking what you believe to be true and accurate. And especially when we're in this zone, because when ideas are new, we're often in a scenario where we don't have the quantitative data to make truly metrics and data-driven decisions. And so we have to rely on more qualitative data. And that's where assumptions can really, really get us and bite us.
Now, this book was not written during the pandemic. Are you seeing at a macro now, Karen and Douglas, more opportunity for companies, middle managers, marketing reps to implement change because there is so much change that had to have happened out of this crisis we're in right now? Or are you seeing the pause button, as you put it earlier, Karen, happening? Is this the moment to really go for it? Or is it the moment to pause and wait till things get back to normal? If there is going to be a normal there.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in there and then let Karen elaborate, because I think this is a really, this gets me really excited. This is notion of maturity curves. And in the book, we talk about prepping for your readiness. So understanding how prepared your company is. And so it really depends on the nature of your company and the nature of your idea. So for instance, if the thing that you've been wanting to do is very aligned with this notion of virtual or remote work, then naturally it's a time to lean in on that. And you're probably already making moves to do that. If, however, the things that you're trying to do are a bit foreign or diametrically opposed to like being apart or whatever environment you've now been swung into, it might be time to take a step back, assess, and think about more kind of planning kind of stages. Because if you move too quickly at a time when it's not opportune, you may ruin your chances of actually getting your idea launched.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a spectrum of who's affected by an idea, right? There's leadership, there's everyone within the organization, and there's you who's pushing it forward. And on the leadership side, 5 years ago at an innovation conference, a chief innovation officer who's heading up product and marketing and branding around this big corporation sat up there and said, new ideas are to come from certain people, and other people are going to be doing the work. And it is my job to find the people that are ready to do new ideas and help them, and allow the people that want to just get their jobs done to, keep their head down and get their jobs done. And man, did that shake me to my core. That is not my belief. I think we all have innovation and ideas within us. And certainly there's times when we need to be heads down, but it's, a whack-a-mole to be able to identify those people in the right time. So instead, it's much better to just instill it in everyone. That was 5 years ago. Now you're hearing from companies, their beliefs that for our company to survive this time that we're going into and to thrive, we need the people within our organization to get those ideas out there. How do I unlock that? How do I help them move forward? And so the beliefs that this was, a special opportunity for certain people, certain titles, they're letting that go. Mm-hmm. Now on the spectrum, you have employees, right? And this nervousness, if at the root of any new idea is fear, right? Whether it's fear of how to do the work and the unknown, or fear of failure, if all of that is in us and trying to make new ideas happen, then, and our organization wants us to do it, it's figuring out a way to get outside of that and take the small steps that can lead to it. So to Douglas's point, if your idea is to do something that just doesn't fit in this moment, how do you realign the problem and thinking about it so that you can do it in this moment? What are the small baby steps that could take you there? And that's the stories that are coming from the marketers, the product managers that are trying to push new ideas forward. They're not going after the big shiny thing right now. They're doing the little things that can build to that, the experiments that teach toward that direction.
Really want to unpack your IP, because I love the book, and I want to contextualize it towards our audience, because I think that there's a lot to be said about moving innovation and ideas we speak with a lot of marketing reps. We speak with a lot of entrepreneurs, or like just marketing reps and organizations that are really trying to push a transition from traditional media to more of a digital approach. I'm really curious what you would say to a marketing rep in order to effectively communicate the change that they're looking to implement in the organization, specifically around how you would have that conversation with that marketing rep to give them the tools that they need in order to effectively communicate the change that they're looking for.
So I think that when you say communication, the first word that comes into my head is narrative. Mm-hmm. And if we don't have a really solid narrative, then it's really difficult for people to get on board with the change or anything that we're trying to do, right? We have to bring people along, and there needs to be a story to kind of captivate them. And we really, in order to have a good narrative, we have to think about who are the actors, and then what's that story arc, or what's that plot look like. And the plot elements or the hooks that are going to be the most effective are the ones that align deeply with what these characters or these actors care about, right? And what are their values. And so rather than me getting really excited about whatever it is that really lights me up about this idea, about this change, what's in it for them? Why do they care? Why would they get excited about it? And so I'm going to make sure the narrative is tuned for them, and that they really understand the why, where we're headed, what are the real outcomes look like. And it's not just, hey, we're gonna adopt Agile, or hey, we're gonna go do this new campaign about lightning storms or whatever it is. And instead, we're gonna get deep into the why it matters, and then what are the outcomes it's gonna drive.
Totally.
Yeah, to add to that, there is an activity in the book all around the business alignment of the strategies, the objectives of the company. And when you have a new idea, your idea came from something that aligned to the company's needs. It wasn't, born out of nowhere, right? So it aligns to some goal that the company is going after. And we often forget that because we're within the company and we live and breathe it. So what our ideas are coming from that, it must be aligned. But if you do not articulate that in a way that leadership understands and sees value, you're not going to get permission to move these things forward. And in the activity, we talk about there being 3 different zones that you can find alignment. And then there's this sweet spot of, when it hits all 3, that your idea can really shine. But, there's the formal ones that are shared through documentation and through standing up and having, the CEO speak to the organization. And then there's the more fuzzy ones, right? The, belief that we're making big bets this year. And so you have to hear some of those and say, is my idea in this example a big enough bet, or is it going to be seen as a small one? So you take all these different components of what you're hearing. And when you actually are disciplined about writing them down and thinking about how your idea aligns in different ways, you can pick the right alignment, because your idea is going to probably nail a couple other objectives, and which one actually is the best traction and the best support, with leadership to bring it forward.
Yeah. So can I just hop in here?
Yeah.
So just so I understand this correctly, so we can keep, so are you saying that, like, when a company puts out a 1-year or 3-year vision, to attach onto those 1 to 3 year visions and the things that they're communicating, and then spin it in a way like that you can communicate the message that fits in directly with their, where the company's headed as an entire vision?
Yes. I mean, if it doesn't fit that, who's going to buy what you're selling?
Yeah.
I think you can. One thing that we talk about in the book is, if your idea is we should be doing a new process, or we should be addressing a new objective, if that's your idea, then you can use the book to go after that. But if your idea is something else, then don't try to attack the process at the same time as pushing a new idea, or don't try to attack the objectives and the goals while you're trying to push forward a new idea. You're going to have to pick one or the other, because you're going to find that it takes a whole lot of fight to make one of them happen. You don't have time to cover both fronts.
And to kind of reverse engineer this, like, this book really, to me, and maybe it is, should be required reading for CEOs and leaders at companies, because they need to understand that the more you empower your employees and your team and your middle managers, the higher your retention rate is going to be. And you're going to keep these people, not have to retrain new employees, because they're not going to be miserable and want to leave and go somewhere else where they can hopefully implement their ideas. So is that one of your sort of North Star goals for this book too? Is to, like, it's a bottom up but top down approach too? Sort of walk us through that.
Yeah, that's something I get really excited about. Karen and I are completely aligned on this notion that we have to excite and activate all the doers, because that's where a lot of the magic happens. But of course, none of that can work. I mean, Karen just mentioned that we have to align with these strategic pillars, right? And so if leadership's not setting clear goals and clear objectives, it's going to be really hard for any of that to align and really to take hold and to have any real big change for the organization. And so they both work in concert. And if we look at the landscape of innovation books, so many of them are focused on culture and strategy and helping the executive figure out how to do all that top down stuff. And we really wanted to focus in on the doer and give them a handbook. But absolutely, if the executive is aware of this handbook and is able to give it to their doers, I mean, how better to empower your entire organization?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the conversations that we have with CEOs are often out of frustration, trying to instill this work and seeing no movement on ideas coming and happening. And there's the layers of the organization that really need to be empowered. And a lot of it is locked up in leadership's brain on how to do this kind of work. Just go do it, right? They've been doing it for years. They have it all figured out, and they have the permission authority to do it. The book talks about how to get around that, and leadership can read it and say, now I know how to teach this. Now I know how to tell people to do the work rather than just go do it.
Yeah.
Karen, that reminds me, it's a bit of a reality check too, because as the CEO is reading this, it's like, oh, I remember what it was like not to have the authority. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, because a lot of these people have worked their way up from the bottom in the food chain, right? They don't just get to be CEO overnight. So you're right. Like, yeah, sorry, Cody, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just look at a company like Best Buy. I spent 10 years in corporate, and one of their values was unleash the power of the people. And they really did a good job at doing that and like giving you the autonomy to make decisions, especially at a management level, to take care of the customer, create customers for life. So it's, when I read the book, it was constantly running through my head. And I'm just really curious, like, you guys spent an entire chapter on turning a no into a yes. So I'm really curious, because to me that sounds more like a sales conversation, because like, it's interesting. We just had Bradley on the podcast. We talked all about sales and how you can essentially isolate an objection and then reposition the no. So I'm curious, like, did this chapter come from a sales conversation, or like what inspired you to write this specific chapter on turning a no into a yes?
So some of that content was originally I had written as one of my first thought pieces on this work, because you're going to hit a zillion no's as you do this work. And a big part of it is accepting that and figuring out a way around it. Now, of course, Douglas and I shaped it in a whole other way and putting activities to it, but at the root of pushing an idea through an organization, you have to accept that you're going to hear no, and you have to figure out how to get around it. And that's the key to this work. The idea around it is, if you accept there's going to be no's, then those are really the opportunity moments, right? The no is going to lead you to a maybe if, and then what? And that's the activity that we walk the learner through. At any point when you're feeling like you hit a roadblock, my boss said, no, you can't do this work because it's not in your job title. Then what, right? Well, maybe if I found an opportunity to create to experiment where it does fit my job title, then what? Then I would do X, Y, Z. And it unlocks these moments where you feel like, how do I move forward? All of a sudden you have a way forward.
Yeah, it's interesting that you compared it to sales, because it's, while there are some similarities, I would say the one big difference is often in sales, we have this thing that we're trying to get someone to buy. And with ideas and with change, with movements, we have to make sure we're adaptable. Now, plenty of products are adaptable, and if you're selling an adaptable product, then it's very much the same. You're listening carefully to understand when you do hit those roadblocks, or when there are new opportunities expose themselves. How can you match that opportunity with some offering, with some capability you have? And maybe it's using the tool in a way that you never intended. But when it comes to your idea, versus sales, you're gonna adapt your idea, you're gonna tweak it, you're gonna modify it so that you can get past these moments of momentary challenge. And to Karen's point, these momentary challenges can create great opportunity, because often constraints are really empowering. I don't know, I find them really empowering. When I'm looking at just a wide open sea of possibility, it can be daunting. But when challenges start to pop up, then I'm just like, oh, I got something to focus on. I can solution around this.
Mm-hmm. To go really high level here to finish things up, but what is the macro argument on why you should instill a culture of allowing for ideas and innovation at a company? I mean, it's not enough just to say, oh, we're making our employees happy. We let them have this idea, we let that pass through or that. But again, if the CEO is reading this book, is there not multiple arguments to be made for your company is never going to stagnate if you continually and constantly innovate and creative ingenuity and at least beta test things? So what's the sort of high level, maybe if you will, North Star goal of the book at that level?
Yeah, I'll jump in really quick. I mean, one thing to pay attention to is the length of time people have been spending on the S&P. It's been collapsing and collapsing, and so that is evidence that you can't just sit around and expect that this cash you have or this position you have is going to protect you, because new things are being developed all the time. Some people say Moore's law is dead, but if you really look at the fundamental philosophy around it versus who cares if transistors are doubling in a certain amount of time, but the rate of change is what's insane. And in fact, change itself is changing, and we're seeing more and more need for more resilient workforces, and also just being adaptable to these kind of new environment. People refer to it as VUCA, et cetera. And so I feel like it's not a maybe, it's a requirement. We have to make sure that our organizations are resilient, or else we will go away. So I guess it depends on if you're looking at this as a temporary company that you want to just take, it's an arbitrage play, you want to take some money off the table, or if you really want to build a legacy, then have a lasting company.
Yeah, to add to that, if we know there's skill sets that you need to have to be able to push ideas, make ideas happen, launch them, innovate, then it's a muscle. Mm-hmm. And that work does not have to start with these radical ideas and changes. It needs to be incremental and learning too. And so another component to this is not only do you need your organization to innovate, to be able to move into the future, but you need your organization to continue to hold those mindsets and practice those skills. And so Start Within is really about finding the ideas to run after and seeing it all the way through, and being resilient to when you hit no, or when things aren't going the way how do you find resources? I mean, the list goes on. And I think when you are teaching that to your employees and empowering them to do that work, you're only helping your organization start to grow in its innovative thinking.
Yeah. This is great. Like any entrepreneur, any marketing rep, I think this goes across the board. Any CEO listening back to this podcast, a ton of great information. I really appreciate your time, Karen, Douglas. If somebody were to want to reach out to you, or they were looking for more information about your book, or about just to learn more about you, where is the best place we can send them?
Well, you can buy the book on Amazon, so that's easy. We have a website, start-within.com, where we have all of our information. You can find both Douglas and I there. We lead workshops and talk to companies about doing this work. And we're both very active on LinkedIn, both through teaching and also through live LinkedIn recordings.
Have you thought about doing your own podcast spinoff of this book? It's a really good name too. I like the brand as a name, and it's very momentum, energy. I'm just curious. Have you ever thought of it?
Right now through LinkedIn, LinkedIn Live, we on Fridays have a 15-minute conversation with a doer within organizations doing this kind of work, and so we've been kind of testing what that content might look like.
I love it. And I highly recommend this. Cody and I both read it. It's an excellent blueprint for launching ideas within your company. And again, I really hope CEOs read this too, as a reminder of where they've been.
Top down.
top down and up down. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And thank you for tuning into the Studio PTBO podcast. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur that's looking to grow in the online space, we have a free Studio PTBO marketing hacks group. It's full of entrepreneurs and business owners that are just really looking to grow and scale their business in the online space. Just search Studio PTBO marketing hacks on Facebook. Karen, Douglas, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Studio PTBO podcast. And thank you for tuning as well. We will see you soon.